Welcome back to the program. Joining us on line number 2 is a lady named Pearl Hart. Pearl is Nelson Hart's mother. Good morning, Pearl. You're on the air.
Good morning. I'd like to call in this morning to shine a little light. Time won't permit me to tell everything I'd like to tell because I'll never live long enough. But I'd like to shine a little light on this video thing with my son from the HMP.
Mm-hmm.
If there's people like this lady this morning that's upset about this video, I would like for them to be able to see the whole video, the full video. They didn't show half.
Have you seen it?
Yes, I did,
okay.
And it's very disturbing. But you know what? The public can't see what goes on down in that HMP because there's no media allowed in there. There's one guard never going to go against another one. And a person that goes in that prison haven't got a prayer, not less than the man that goes in there under a sting operation. My son was convicted and wrongly convicted, and it's time for people to realize that and let it go. This family has been torn apart long enough, and there's no reason for my son to be barbarized when he's in prison. The only reason that my son was barbarized like that because he would not fight back. Now, the part of that video that wouldn't seen was the part that began days and days and days before this kiddo was thrown at the TV. I called a number of times and spoke with the captains in that prison about the things that this Preston and Williams, for whatever reason, I like to know why. I don't know if they're getting paid by the sting or whether somebody is behind them, but something is behind this situation for them to barbarize my son the way they did.
Well, your son threatened the guards, though, right?
Well, yes, I know that. But you know what? When you're in prison for something you didn't do, and with the treatment that they're getting down there, would you not be angry? No less than a guard coming in and throwing your dinner on the floor, which was about 3 times that he was after doing that. And another time that Nelson called me, he after throwing a pack of biscuits, even to a few peppermint knobs he had in his cell for heartburn, took it and threw it in the garbage. I'd like to know why. Why? That's one big question I would like to come face to face with this man and ask him what's his beef with my son. And with all those guards, this man was lying on bunk. All those guards, I counted them, 10 guards going into the pen, going into his cell and jumping them. There's nothing on that video that shows the blood that come out of my son they beat out of him. There's nothing on that video to see when he went into seizure. But they took him then on top of that and put him down in segregation for 5 days. I didn't know what was happening to him until his lawyer in Cornerbrook called me and said Nelson has been beat up. I never knew a thing. I called in. I asked the captain, how come I haven't been hearing from Nelson? He said, your boy was a bad boy, Mrs. Hart. I said, oh, what happened? We're not allowed to discuss it. Okay, where was all those guards? They had 10 guards go in the room in the pen for Nelson into his cell. Where was all those guards the day the church was getting tore up and that man was getting beat to he just about killed him? Where was all those 10 guards to then? All I seen them was one guard. You know, there's something not right about this whole picture. And this lady asked if where Nelson was and if he was home and if he was out of prison. Yes, my son is home. He's been acquitted. Don't people listen to the news? He's been acquitted. Why is it that my family can't finally be left alone?
You know what? You know why it is, Mrs. Hart. You know why it is. Because people think your son got away with murder.
Yes, Where's the part that people think he got away with murder? But where's the part that people don't understand how a sting operation works? This is what people needs to do, is they need to get more educated about this sting operation, because when you're took in by a sting operation, there is no such thing as you being innocent. You're guilty regardless. My son had a seizure down there that day, and those children drowned while he was recovering from a seizure. And what else can he do but tell what happened? There's nobody there that day that can back him up. But how about if we put a call out to all the people that is in that HMP that has experienced the same brutal going overs that my son have, and why is it that they're able to treat human beings? They're still human beings. How is it that they're allowed to treat human beings so humane? Because I tell you something, if you took a dog and done that to him, you'd be all in court and charged. But you know what? Those guards will never be charged because they stick together like bubble gum.
Mrs. Hart?
Pardon?
Mrs. Hart, I guess it's some 13 years ago now when your granddaughters died and drowned.
Yes.
And, of course, that's extraordinary loss for any family to have suffered.
That's right.
Did you ever have cause to think that Nelson did it?
Never. Look, I'm telling you something from the bottom of my heart. If I thought for 1 second, that my son drowned those kids, the law would not have to do nothing with them, because I would do it. Now, I am saying that with the Lord knows that I am telling that right from the bottom of my heart. But this is a torture that have haunted this family for all those years. It's bad enough to lose those dear little angels. But do you know what? I would have rather lost my son with them children that day.
Mrs. Hart, when all this went down, I think most people will agree that type of behavior by the RCMP in this Mr. Big, that was the name of the operation, I think, right?
Yes,
so,
it was.
It's since been thrown, your son's conviction has been thrown out because of that, and given the fact that, it's unfair to put people in that situation. Why do you think Nelson lied that day about having committed the crime?
I tell you right now, I'm glad you asked that. My son, all my family knows, and anybody that is close to me knows that my son wanted only 3 things in life. He wanted a family, he wanted a wife, children, and a driver's license, because he wanted to be like his brothers. He wanted to drive, he wanted to work. Okay? Now, when that happened that day, he thought twice about saying that he took a seizure, because he always, and any doctor, he had the same doctor, which was Dr. Button for 30-odd years. He always didn't want nobody to know that he was having seizures. For the same reason, he didn't want to lose his driver's license. That's the only thing that kept my son. Those seizures, with my son, seizures ruled his life. They ruined his life, and now they've taken his life.
Do you think that Nelson, I understand, do you think that Nelson, after the death of his children, your grandchildren, was anxious to become a criminal and get in bed with these people, so he would lie to them to try to be one of them, to try to be...
My son.
How did he find himself in that predicament? How do you think that happened?
When this started first, I don't mean to cut you off, I'm just trying. When this started first, my son came to me one day, came in the house all dressed up. I said, "Oh, where are you going, bud?" He said, "I'm going to Halifax now, Mom." But he said, "I got to tell you something now." He said, "Mom, I wonder," he said, "is there anything wrong with this crowd now?" He said, "I'm working now, Mom." And I said, "Oh, good." Now, and automatically I said to him, "How come you're working?" Because the only jobs that Nelson could ever get was government grants, right? Because nobody could hire him because of insurance purposes.
Because of his seizures? So he had a history of seizures.
Yes, because of his seizures. Okay, insurance wouldn't allow him to work. So anyway, I said to him, I said, Nelson, who gave you this job? He said, I got it at Manpower. And I said, oh. And he said, Mom, I'm worried. He said, they called me yesterday. He said, wanted me to go down. He said, to the Mount Peyton Hotel. He said, and pick up a box and take somewhere. He said, I suppose, Mom, that's not drugs or nothing for me to get in trouble with the law. Nelson's fear all his life was RCMPs, and he never, ever done anything to break the law. So anyway, I said, well, boy, I'll know that. I said, if you wants me, if you feels uncomfortable, I said, Mom, I'll phone up to the RCMP. So I phoned up to the RCMP. They put me through to an RCMP officer in Grand Falls. I told him that my son did that and the other thing. He said, what's your son's name? I told him Nelson Hart. He said, Ms. Hart, he said, you tell your son if somebody is foolish enough to give him money to do little jobs, tell him not to worry. There's nothing wrong with it. Go ahead and do it. So then after that, he felt a little bit better. But you know what? They got so uneasy then, afraid that this thing was going to be not go ahead because Nelson was picking up little things and I was picking up little things, that they moved it to Moncton, where they got him in there. They done everything in the world. There's no man ever allowed to do the criminal hacks that those people do. They had Nelson breaking into cars. They had him doing everything against the law. They had him driving vehicles across the island with two doors tied together. His wife told me herself that one time they drove to Nova Scotia in a vehicle that was tied together from one door to the next, and Nelson took a seizure on the way, and she almost stripped the gears, or whatever it is called, out of the vehicle, trying to stop the vehicle when Nelson was in a seizure. I often think about it. If my son had a seizure behind the wheel, here was the people in Grand Falls at the motor registration office, every time Nelson had a seizure and went to the hospital, they would take his license for so long. But after he went so long without a seizure, they would give him his license back again. Now, here we are with RCMP officers knowing that Nelson was the worst of the worst epilepsy. They put him behind wheels in big old vehicles, going back and forth, Nova Scotia, St. John's, everywhere else.
Why didn't Nelson just choose not to? Did he ever tell you why he felt the pressure and why he felt the pressure to admit, even if in your words you say he was lying when he admitted that he killed his own children?
Yes,
why would he have committed any of these crimes, and why would he have told that particular lie, even under the pressure? Because I mean, people who didn't kill their own children would never, even in their weakest moments, admit to that type of horrific crime. Why would he do that?
I'm glad you asked that too. They got him in Moncton in the hotel room in there, and this is what they did. They used fake blood. They brought in a person that they already just beat up and told Nelson, if you listen to this video where they got this confession out of Nelson, 3, if not 4 times, when this Mr. Big, is so-called Mr. Big, I'm wondering how big he's going to be when he stands before God Almighty. But anyway, leave that as it is. They said to him, listen, this is what we do to people that don't tell us what we wants to hear. Now, you better tell us what we wants to hear, because people that go against us go away for a very long time.
So you're saying they threatened to kill him if he didn't admit to it, as opposed to just saying... So as opposed to just say that, I didn't kill my children, if that means I can't be part of this organization, I'll just leave.
He said it 4 times. It's on the video. He said it 4 times. They played it in court where Nelson said, no, sir. He said, I never killed my children. He said, I love my children. He said, I had a seizure. Don't say that. Look, this is what happened. That's when they brought in this fellow with his face all blood and it was fake, but he didn't know that.
Miss Hart?
Then they told... What?
Did you ever worry about your granddaughters with Nelson if he had the series of seizures as part of his history?
Yes, I did.
So, I mean, did you know that day that they were going down to the wharf and that the girls would be in the water and Nelson could indeed, like you say, you were worried about him having a seizure while he drove? Were you worried about him having a seizure when and if the girls were around water or around the slide or the swings or alone with him in the home?
Yes. But see, I wasn't married to Nelson. Nelson didn't live home. His wife would never leave them children go down there with Nelson that day if she thought Nelson was going to have a seizure. She's not with Nelson anymore, but she's one of the best mothers that ever was. She might not say that about me, but I can say that about her. And she stayed behind that morning to get her bath. She bathed her children, and they started like every other normal child. They started tearing their hair down. Jennifer was a mother that had every hair in place. She never had a peck on those children, not a peck. Never. And she had them ready to go down to the gander activities. Now, the day before that, Jennifer and Nelson was down to this wharf place, this where they drowned.
Okay.
A Little Harbor. The day before that, because Nelson and her were down there, they put in new swing sets and that down there, and Nelson and her took the children and went down, and they had the evening down there with a little lunch. The children was in the swings, and Nelson and Jennifer was there with them. Now, this morning that this happened, Jennifer said, I won't be ready yet, she said, Nelson, for another hour, because I got to get a bath and I got to do my hair. So anyway, the children started tearing their hair out and making themselves messy, and Jennifer said to Nelson, take them out, Nelson, for a little ride in the car while I'm getting ready. So that's what Nelson done. But when the children got out in the car, they wanted to go swing. And they wanted to go down to look at the fishes. Now, which meant the day before they were looking at fishes, they were looking in the water, they were down in the swing. As soon as they got in the car that morning, they wanted to go down to see fishes and go down swings. So Nelson said, I got a hour, why not go down? He went down there. This happened. That man can't tell any more than that because he don't know any more.
How did you find out that the girls had died?
How did I find out?
Yeah, did Nelson tell you? Did the police tell you how that happened?
Nelson called me and told me, Mom, he said, he said, something wrong. He said, I can't find Karen and Krista's in the water. I was up in St. Mary's Bay. And he called me. And then I got in contact with the RCMP, and then they told me.
When's the first time he told you that it was because of a seizure? Because isn't there a gap in the story where it took him a while to say it was because of a seizure that he lost sight of the girls?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Because all he said first was that he took Karen out of the car and he went back for Krista, or vice versa, whatever the case might be. He took out Krista and went back for Karen. I don't know which way that goes now. But anyway, he said that's all he remembers. He kept that up. He said, I don't know, Mom, what happened to me that day. He said, I can't tell you that, he said. All I know is the last time I saw them, they were running towards the wharf. Now, he will tell you that today. And he was under all kinds of interrogation. The police done everything in the world. His story did not change. But now, it changed in a couple of 3 or 4 days after that. He decided. He said, I got to tell. He come down here one day and he said, Mom, I said, Nelson, what really happened to those children? And I couldn't ask him very many questions because when this happened, they had me sedated for over a month.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'd come to, I'd always ask the question, what happened? What happened? What happened? And he would tell me the same story. Mom, I don't know. All I remember is taking one out of the car, but he would say which one, then going back for the other one. So I said, well, Nelson, if you can't remember what happened to you, you never had a seizure down there that day, did you? And he looked at me, and he stopped, and he looked at me. He said, Mom, if I says I had a seizure, I'll lose my license. I said, Nelson, did you have a seizure?
Did you think you planted that in his head then? Do you think that he chose that as his story because you proposed it?
No. No. He
with
came
his
here
seizures,
that day to tell me that.
With
he
his
came
seizures,
that day to tell me that.
Okay, with his seizures and any other particular mental health or emotional issues that Nelson had, did you at any point think he was unfit to be a father and to be alone with the girls?
No, my dear. No, I did not. But see, some of the things that Nelson had hanging over his head that people don't understand. When Nelson takes a seizure, whatever is in his hands stays in his hands until he comes out of the seizure. Now, when Jennifer came to me that day and told me that she was pregnant, I said, oh, my God, Jennifer, I'm glad you're pregnant, Mother. I said, I'm happy for you, but I said, I hope the child won't be born with seizures. Okay, I'm telling you this story for a reason now. So anyway, no, she said, I hope not either. So anyway, after a while, when she got another test, or probably two more or whatever, she found out she was having twins. She came to me this day, she and Nelson, their eyes was bubbling with excitement. They came to me, Pearl, we got something to tell you. Mommy said, well, Jennifer's having twins. I said, oh, my blessed God. Jennifer, I said, how many times, not only that time, how many times did me and Jennifer have that discussion? Jennifer, what will happen, though, Jennifer, if Nelson is feeding one of them youngsters and he takes the seizure? You're going to have to watch very carefully because, he could, that was always my fear. Afraid he would squat them or especially when they're newborn, their heads are so niche and everything else. And I used to say to Jennifer, my God, if you knows that Nelson is sick, because he has headaches before he has seizures sometimes, and then I used to say, now, Jennifer, if you ever knows that Nelson is having a seizure, don't let him take up them youngsters. Now, that caused Nelson not to do as much with a child as I wanted him or somebody else to do, because he was under this fear that if he happened to take a seizure while they was in his hands, that that he could harm those children, right? So anyway, every time you ever saw those children, Nelson was with them, but Jennifer was with them too, and Jennifer was the one that would have them all or have them up. This is why. But when they got older, the fear started to ease off, because they were older, and they knew when their father was having a seizure, because their father would, now Jennifer could back me up with all of this too. Nelson would find himself getting sick, and he would go in the bathroom and keep flushing the toilet, because whatever he's doing when he goes in that seizure lingers with him while he's in the seizure.
Yes, sir, let me ask you a couple more quick questions before we run out of time, because they're waving me off to the news. Based on what I'm hearing from you, and I'm not going to put words in your mouth, I'll get you to react to this. Does it seem to you, as it does to me, and I think many of the people listening this morning, that Nelson was more concerned with keeping his driver's license in regard to his seizures and what have you? He was more concerned with that than he was with the safety of his own girls. Well,
now, that I will admit. That I will. Not that he was more concerned about the safety of his girls. Nelson had a whirl. He had a gold mine. He had the jackpot when those girls were born. He really did. And as for his wife, he worshipped the breath she breathed. And all this sting operation done to Nelson was tear his family apart, ruin his life, and I don't think for a minute that Nelson will ever have a life again.
Do you think that Nelson has played his own important role in his life being ruined?
No, he has not.
Do you think he's being unfairly treated and charged with some of these crimes, whether it be...
Exactly.
You do?
Very, and I think myself, I'm judging now, and God forgive me for judging. I try not to judge, because I believe that if you judge, you will be judged. I believe that if those guards was to tell the truth, even if I could get one of them to tell the truth about how Nelson was treated in that prison. I will tell you something. Have you got a couple of more minutes to
go right ahead, yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you something. I was sitting at my table one day when a phone call came. Now, hear me out before you jumps to conclusions. A phone call came, and this was the operator, a click call from Paul. I got his name. I wrote it down anyway. Paul Garrett. That was his name. And I said, I'm sorry, operator, I don't know no Paul Garrett. I said, I'm not accepting no calls. He said, and in the background I heard him say, it's from the HMP in St. John's. Oh, my. I said, okay, I'll accept the call, operator. This was a man, but I hope he don't mind me saying this, Paul Garrett. He said, Mrs. Hart. I said, yes. He said, I'm calling from the pen. He said, I was down in the hole with Nelson, because this is what they do in there. Any time that an inmate gets beat up, they're took and put down in the hole until they heals. And then they're not allowed any phone calls, they're not allowed any privileges, because when Nelson was beat up this time, he tried to call his lawyer, and this guard that's in question now even turned the volume down on the phone, and the lawyer said, Nelson, I can't hear you, and then all of a sudden he would go in loud, and then all of a sudden he got cut off. Well, anyway, this Paul Garrett called me this day, and I accept this call, and I said, why, what's going on? He said, I'm down in the hole with Nelson, and he said, if you wants to save your son, you better phone him. Phone the prison and ask to talk to the captain to see what he can do. I phoned the prison, talked to the captain. They had Nelson down in the hole then, and Williams or Preston, whichever one the man won. Now, one of them is a woman and one of them is a man. Whichever one the man was, he had the water shut off to Nelson's flush toilet. He was down there 5 days breathing in sewer, till finally Preston went on days off. That's Preston, yes. He went on days off, and another guard came in, and when he came in and came down the hole, this other guy down in the hole said to him, he said, I'm just about poisoned down there, he said, with sewer. And the guard said, oh, my goodness. He said, yes, something wrong with Nelson's toilet. He said, plugged up. No, the inmate said, there's nothing wrong. Preston got the water turned off. Over goes the guard. Why don't they tell the truth? Over goes this other guard, turns the water on and flushes the toilet. This is the kind of stuff that this Preston done.
Yeah, I have no idea what goes on down there, and nor do I know both sides of the story, and I'll leave you...
No, that's right. So anyway, this Paul Garrett called me. He said Nelson have had 5 seizures since yesterday evening. And he said he's down in the hole, very little, just a little blanket, a little sheet to go over, and lying on a steel bunk, and just cold enough down in that hole. Well, it's a place they put him for punishment, right? But it's a place they put him to when they want to cover up the dirty work that they do is when they bruises them and beats them. I'd like to put out a call to the public, to somebody that has been in that prison, that have seen the way that those 2 particular guards have treated Nelson, and I'd like for them to come forward, and for once that somebody would come forward and prove that Nelson Hart is not in the wrong. And I do believe that somebody is behind this Mr. Preston and Mrs. Williams to treat Nelson the way, because the rest of them didn't treat him like it. But they will go along with Preston and Williams, because would you not, if you had to work every day with those guys? Would you go against them?
I don't know what I would do in that situation.
So.
I'd like to think that I'd be able to tell the truth.
Yes, I would.
Miss Hart, so you know that given how you're speaking about what happened and how Nelson's been treated ever since, you're portraying a picture where everything is poor Nelson Hart, that he's never done anything wrong.
No,
so it's not poor Nelson Hart, and I think that's important to get through, because it's quite obvious to me that during his life he's made some mistakes. He's maybe committed some crimes. He's certainly committed some crimes since the death of his own children. So for people who are at home thinking, you know what, Pearl Hart is just defending her son without any consideration for the justice for those 2 dead young girls. So when people are saying that, they've got no compassion or sympathy for Nelson, and you're portraying him as something as he's the victim in every circumstance, except people don't feel that way. I'll give you just to let you wrap it up on that sentiment, that there's no way that people believe that Nelson is as pure as a driven snow, and what he's saying.
I don't either.
Okay.
I don't either. No, sir, I am not saying that Nelson is pure. I am not saying he haven't done any wrong, because Nelson have always been very bitter man, having to live with epilepsy. It has, like I just told you before, it ruled his life, it ruined his life, and it took his life. And I'm telling you, it took his family as well. But I'm telling you right now that it's time for someone to, or something to happen, that Nelson can be proven innocent, because all of this is those guards are trying to get a dig in at Nelson, because he got his case got overturned and got acquitted of this crime. And the reason that is, I believe, it might not be, I'm saying that I hope that God would forgive me if I'm wrong. I think there is still, if those people was to tell the truth, there's something or someone behind those people making them treat Nelson in the way that he's been treated. Where were they? Where were they? Where was those 10 guards when those 2 men was beating this other fellow in this chapel, and beat the chapel right to pieces, and had time to do all that when there was only 1 guard?
Yeah,
because they wouldn't face anybody that's going to fight them back. Nelson is not a fighter, and they knows it. But what the people don't see is all the torture that Nelson went through the day prior to throwing the kittle at this TV.
What do you think is going to become of Nelson? Is he going to continue to live here? Because no matter where he goes, and I'll admit this one fact to you. When I was working in TV, we went down to the penitentiary to do a show, and this is after your son had been convicted.
Yes.
The first set of eyes I saw looking out through the cell block was your son. I'll never forget it. And at that point, all I knew was that Nelson Hart had killed his 2 daughters, so said the court at that time, and the result of this sting, as we've found out.
Yes, that's right.
Is he planning on continuing to live here? Does he have any plans for his future? Because you know full well.
Why shouldn't he live there?
I've just asked you, let me finish the question.
Yes, he is continuing to live there.
Because no matter where he goes for the rest of time, people who are legal beagles will say he's been found innocent in the eyes of the law, given the fact his conviction was overturned. But people will, and I can't speak for every single person, but I think a lot of people will always view him as the man who killed his 2 girls. Is he going to be able to live with that and stay around here?
And knows this family, knows that I never would in a million years for $1 million or $1 billion agree that Nelson didn't kill those children if I thought for any minute he didn't. But I'm asking you the question now. I got a chance to ask you a question.
Yes, go right ahead.
If this happened to you, how would you prove, if you was wrongly convicted in the death of these 2 children, how would you prove yourself that if you didn't do it?
You know what I will say to that, because it's an excellent question. I don't even know how to answer it, but I know one thing that I would do is that regardless of the pressure being put on me by gangsters or police officers in a sting or in an interrogation room at the police headquarters, if I hadn't killed my children, I would never admit, no matter what. You could waterboard me, beat me too unmercifully. If I didn't kill them, I would have never said it, no matter what. That much I can tell you.
Not even if you was
no matter
a grade
what.
5 education with a brain problem and died in a room in Moncton with no English or nothing, and told that you was going to be made away with and flushed down the toilet, and people like him went away for a very long time, and your life was in jeopardy.
I'm telling you,
had a wife back home.
Miss Hart, all I can tell you is that if I hadn't committed such a crime, which is horrific. Now, whatever happened to those girls, only between God and Nelson, whoever else, someone omniscient knows. But I do know for myself, just knowing what I know about myself and my inner conscience and my inner voice, if I hadn't have done it, you couldn't get me to say I did it, no matter what you did to me, no matter what threat I faced.
You was Indians, Mr.
That's all I can tell. That's all I know about myself.
I know. But if you was Indians, I pray that no one never again will be in his hands, because I think myself, if the public got educated and got in on how this sting operation works, they would then realize how Mr. Hart, they call him, or Nelson Hart, or whatever they must call, whatever they wants to call him, they would know right there and then why he agreed that he made away with his children. If they were in the hands of this sting operation, and if they knew how this sting operation works, They told it in court. I listened to it myself. He said, we will use every tool we got, and they did. They used millions and billions of dollars getting Nelson to say that he done this. And 3 times the contract almost got canceled because they couldn't get him to say it. They done everything under the sun to get Nelson to do this, and the only way they won was when they took him to New Brunswick, put him in a hotel, all French, didn't know nobody, and brought in a fellow beat to hell, and with those shackles on from Hell's Angels and everything else, and scared the life out of him, and told him that he had to say what they wanted to say, or either that he was going to go away for a very long time. Now, you got to be in a situation like that, and Nelson, I said to Nelson many times, just like the question you just asked me now, why would he admit it? I said, Nelson, why did you admit to lose? He said, Mom, I figured that once I told him that, I got back home, he said, I was going to go to the RCMP. Now, that's something else. I'd like to put in that little dig 1 minute before I leave, before I goes off the air. If you got in trouble tomorrow, you goes to the RCMP, okay? Mm-hmm. I raised my children that way. If they got in trouble, go to the RCMP. Who do you go to when it's the RCMP that is the trouble? Who do you go to?
Ms. Hart, it's an important question, and, police investigating themselves is always a concern for everybody. I know we've gone quite a long time here this morning. I'm glad that you called and have shared your opinion and perspective on the entire thing. I know it's torn the family apart. I do appreciate your time, and I wish you well.
I wish myself well, because I know one thing for sure. There is nothing in the world that I would do to get those children back. There's nothing I would do to have stopped Nelson from taking them children that morning and driving. There's nothing that his wife would do to turn that around. But there's nothing can be done about it now. And don't think that Nelson don't have his times when he cries himself to sleep over his little girls.
Mrs. Hart,
don't think.
Thank you very much for joining us. Once again, I wish you nothing but the very best, and we'll talk again anytime that you see fit.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That was fascinating.